Welcome to this week's edition of Black Authors Matter TV, where we interview the latest movers and shakers in the African American literary community. You'll meet some old friends, discover new ones, and stay abreast of the latest book developments around the country and even the world. So sit back and relax for the next 2 hours with Black Authors Matter TV co-hosts Gwen Richardson and Dr. Rhonda Lawson.
And welcome to another episode of Black Authors Matter TV. It's January 10th, and we are trudging along as the year has started. So, these years go by so fast. We're almost at 3 years. The show will be 3 years old in July. So it's amazing. But I welcome you to the show, and I'm your host for tonight, along with my co-host, Dr. Rhonda Lawson, whose image isn't on yet, but she is on the way in terms of being able to see her. There she is. Okay.
I was working with my left hand. I'm horrible with my left hand.
Oh, okay. Okay. Well, I welcomed everybody, and we're excited to have you all watching the show once again. And we have an amazing lineup, and we have some amazing guests coming up just in the next several weeks. We have booked some really, really great guests. So before we get started, I have a few announcements. Our first guest is in the waiting room. But I do want to say that the National Black Book Festival registration is now open for those of you all who are planning to attend. The registrations are they've kicked off quick this year. And so I'm expecting that we'll sell out early because it's starting off with a bang with people signing up very early. Also, the Jerry Pinkney Children's Book Awards, that process is now open as well. So if you have a children's book, you want to go check it out at jerrypinkneybookawards.com. Our book club kickback has been moved to March 14th. There was a conflict with the author teaching a class at the same time as the show. So the book we'll be reading is The House of Eve by Sadika Johnson, and it will be the second half of the show on March 14th. Two more things before we bring on our first guest. Last week, we had a book that we were giving away, and somehow we missed the answers. And when I went back and looked at the comments from last week, I saw that Lydia Brew had won this book. So, Lydia, this book will be in the mail to you. The book by Nana Akua, Brew Hammond. It's an anthology. So, Lydia, your book will be in the mail to you. And my 2013 edition of the 101 Scholarship Applications book, What It Takes to Obtain a Deputy College Education. This is the proof that I got. But the book itself is now available on Amazon, the book or the Kindle.
The 2013 version.
Did I say 2013? 2023. There wasn't an edition in 2013. So anyway, I'm sorry I misspoke and I didn't catch it. Thank you for catching it, Rhonda. So the 2023 edition is now available on Amazon. I didn't get my first shipment yet, so that's why I'm showing you that proof. We have 2 books to give away, but we'll do that at the end of the first interview. And our first guest, we welcome to Black Authors Matter TV. Her name is Kelly McWilliams. She writes fantasy and horror. She has her latest book is called Mirror Girls. And the book it's an amazing storyline. It concerns biracial twins who were separated at birth, and is set in the civil rights movement. So
a lot of layers.
I was reading the information, the synopsis on the book. It sounds really interesting. And it's a lot of historical fiction being written these days. And I'm reading one now. I just finished one. There's a lot more available. And Mirror Girl sounds like a great book to read as well, to add to my to-be-read shelf. So, Kelly, thank you for being a guest and welcome to Black Authors Matter TV. Oh, we need your sound.
Thank you guys so much for having me.
You're welcome. And I see the book there behind you. I believe you want to.
This is it. I'm gonna foreground that.
Oh, okay. And you have it's an interesting graphic on the cover where the art, it looks like a mirror image of, so it's like a.
It does. I have my twin sisters featured in this book, and so the mirror images of each other, and it's very much actually based on how me and my brother grew up. I was the light-skinned child, and he's obviously Black to other people. And so I wrote this book to sort of try to process some of these feelings about the way we grew up, where people never wanted to connect us together as family. And it felt like people were always trying to separate us really from, the very beginning. So I think that's kind of what I got to let out. So that's kind of the Mirror Girls idea.
Well, a lot of books are semi-autobiographical in storylines and plots and characters. When you're an author, there are people that you even think of in your past sometimes that you'll make characters in your book. And I'm a writer, so I understand that, some of you visualize people in the past and you say, that's who that is. That's who that person is.
It's true. Yes, and sometimes you don't even know you were thinking about them until later. And then you're
right.
Oh,
that's true. That's true. And some characters are composite,
I like to call it the what if factor, because even if it's something that happened in real life, I'll always think, okay, well, what if such and such happened instead of so and so happened? And then I usually write from that point of view. So it'll have a little bit of real life in it, but it's going to be totally fiction. I don't want anybody to say they know me by reading my books.
Oh. Well, that is one way of looking at it. Yeah, I mean, you can always change the names, and you can always change places and names and situations. Mm-hmm. So it's easy to mask the actual identity of someone. Unless it's like you're spilling the beans on family business, which is kind of sort of seems like you're doing in your book.
Are you spilling?
And actually, I come from a long tradition of spilling the beans too, because my mother is also a writer, and she actually told me, I said, do you ever worry that someone's going to recognize themselves in your book? And she said, it's the funniest thing, because the people that I write about the most explicitly never recognize themselves.
Wow.
There's something about like the way we see ourselves,
right.
And we're perceived differently by other people. And so the way she writes about her mother or her grandmother, they're not going to recognize that.
It's the Johari window effect.
Right.
You see yourself one way, but there are other people who see things that you just don't see. Those are your blind spots.
100%. Yeah. And I think that's like always been kind of an interesting concept to me too, just because of the way also then skin color impacts the way we see other people around us. I definitely for sure spilled the beans. I said this in the civil rights era in the 50s, but I remember going through school with my brother, and I was like in my high school, I was valedictorian, right? Had this great experience, thought these people around me were these great people. And he came through and they were calling the police on him when he was staying after school in the afternoon. It was just one of those wild things, but I should have known better, to tell you the truth, because the very first story my mother ever told me about myself, I was born in a hospital in Maryland to a Black woman, and a nurse took me away for some testing, and they brought back to her a brown baby boy. And she had to get up after her C-section and go walk through the halls, hollering and screaming, like, where's my baby? Because the nurses couldn't tolerate the idea that two different looking people could go together.
That is amazing that they actually just tried to replace you.
Yeah, they, and they had, it was funny because they had the name tags, right? You get the little name bracelet on mama and baby. And I was a girl, and they brought her somebody else's baby boy. And it was just because they were, moving things around, and they said, oh, it's an accident, but we know these things are never really accidents. And it was a story that she told me over and over and over again, because it was clearly a point of trauma for her.
Of course.
Yeah. And I think that looking into that sort of how these impacts on mixed race families, like they go back so deep, and they start day one and they really sink into your bones. And what happens for my sisters in this book is they haven't reckoned with it. They haven't, been together as a family until they're teenagers. And then is it possible for you to start again? And how do they integrate, like the many generations that led to their existence?
It's also interesting to me that you said this happened in Maryland.
Yes.
And this is something that many people would think would happen in the Deep South. I'm from Louisiana. We would expect something like that to happen in Louisiana, Alabama, Mississippi, but they don't think about these types of situations happening in Maryland.
Right. And, Maryland is a funny place. Maryland, it's like, sometimes I think it's a little more of the South than people would think.
Right.
And in this book, in Mirror Girls, Charlie, she's my sister, who's the civil rights organizer in Harlem. She takes the train, she's in integrated Harlem. She takes the train down south, and it was at Baltimore that the train suddenly segregated. That's when, they would make the announcement, you have to get to the back of the train. And that's when she and her grandmother, she was traveling with her ailing grandmother, had to move, because that was the city on the train line that demarcated that Mason-Dixon line. And so in a way, it's like kind of like right on that edge. And sometimes I think that makes people like edgy.
Right.
Is that historically true? Factually true?
Yeah, that's true.
That was the point.
That was that train. Yeah. And I remember reading that when I was researching for this book, in a book by Mr. Gerald Packer called An American Nightmare. And he was writing about the returning GIs from the World War. And they would be in sort of sometimes integrated units, and they would stay over in New York, and then they'd be trying to get back home to the South, and it would hit them what kind of reality they were returning to when they hit that stop in Baltimore.
Were you and your brother twins?
We were not twins. No, that's definitely where I'm sort of like gussing the situation up a little bit. He's 3 years younger than me, baby of the family.
Wow. Are you still in Maryland?
No, I actually live in Seattle. We all actually ended up headed out to Seattle in sort of like a random way. But we lived in Maryland for a while. We also lived in Los Angeles for a while, Arizona for a while. And then he actually went to nursing school again out in Baltimore. And my grandparents are out there.
Wow.
So you've been moving around a lot.
Yeah, we kind of have been around.
Now, someone asked, was there a show tonight? And there is a show, so I'm not sure. She sent me a text. So, Mary, there is a show and people are on. So I just wanted to check, because I know we went live, and I'm like, okay, what? So there is a show, and here we are. So your storyline, the twins are separated at birth.
That's right.
And do they are they both adopted by Black families, or is one with the white family? How does that, or is that something that we have to wait? It's a spoiler.
I won't give you any spoilers, but they're separated at birth after their parents are murdered in rural Georgia for being a mixed race couple. And my Black presenting sister is taken by her grandmother to live in Harlem. They're told to sort of get out of town. And my white presenting sister is actually raised on the old plantation with the white family, who are not nice and actually tell her that she is white. Wow. And they tell her that up until she's about ready to get married, right? Because that's when you might need to start to know. And she realizes that she's been raised in this racist culture, that she is herself racist. And her sister then one day comes knocking on her door because she wants to know what happened to her family. And she has to make, then Magnolia, my white presenting sister, has to make the choice, where do my allegiances lie? What kind of, where on this color line am I going to stand? Because you can't have it both ways. And her sister has to decide, am I going to accept her? Even, are there amends that she needs to make, for being in this segregated white society? And how deep does blood go? And that is really the heart of the story.
That sounds really interesting.
I knew that there were a lot of layers to this story.
It sounds very, very interesting. Now, about Maryland, I did want to say that Maryland was where Alex Haley's ancestor, Kunta Kinte, that's where he came. That's where the ship was when he
Right.
got off the ship.
There's still a
It was in,
statue to Alex
right,
Haley at that port in Annapolis.
in Annapolis, Maryland. So Maryland
Yeah.
was part of it.
All those port cities, you got to
Right.
watch out. I remember I went to college on the East Coast, and I thought, I don't know, I had this idea, it was up out of Maryland, wasn't anywhere near Virginia. It was going to be, I don't know, I had this idea in my mind that there was this safer northern place, which was very naive of me at the time. And the university that I went to, it only took me maybe 20 minutes of walking around, like I, enrolled, to find the plaques that were talking about sort of the ships that came through and its connection. I mean, these old universities in particular were just built on the slave trade. And so those ports where things came through, I just think that there's a layer where it can't be trusted. But I've been thinking about that a little bit too, because I have my next book is coming out in May, and it's called Your Plantation Prom Is Not Okay. And it features a girl who's sort of fighting back against the way these histories are kind of sanded over and made more invisible, so that there won't be the memorials that we need to see in these places. They won't have the recognition, and people are out there fighting tooth and nail to take down Confederate statues, and it's just it's interesting. Yeah, I when you were saying there's been a lot of historical fiction, I think a lot of that is like people want to reclaim these stories that were really covered, buried,
Yeah, that happened during in 2020 in the height of COVID. All of the statues, Confederate statues in New Orleans were taken down. And the last statue to come down was Robert E. Lee statue that stood in the center of the city. And people fought tooth and nail. They still haven't renamed that circle because they're trying to figure out what to name it now that the statue is gone.
Right.
Well, the historical fiction, a lot of it, well, recently I've been reading a lot that's from that period, the same period that the 60s or the 50s. And it's bringing characters to life from that period, because a lot of what we know about the 60s is factual in terms of the milestones and, the tragedies, the assassinations, the bombings, being hosed by the sheriffs and so forth. But the people, characters, the people and some of their lives, their daily lives and loves and things, challenges and triumphs, that part of it is really starting to be brought to life through historical fiction. And is really, really a pleasure to read. For someone especially that loves fiction. Now, is your book geared toward young adults, or is it for everyone?
Yes, this is it's for readers 12 and up, is sort of how it's marketed, but it's right there in young adult fiction, which these days they're kind of finding people are reading up until 25, into their 20s. People who fell in love with young adult fiction as teenagers and as kids continue to read it. But I think it's kind of that sort of crossover. I would recommend it for younger kids and for anyone who's interested in the sort of the topic. And I think because it's young adult, I did mix in, a little bit of magic. There's some ghosts, there's some magic mirrors, of course, because it's all about sort of that reflection in the mirror. But I agree with you that historical fiction, like, it's one thing to learn about history, but when you hear the voices, and people and hearts and people with families like that we get from stories, it's a game changer. And I remember when I was researching, I did a lot of nonfiction reading, and I kind of like wasn't getting inspired. So what I ended up reading and basing a lot of the material on just the day-to-day life of what it was like to be in the 1950s, outside Savannah, was oral histories, people interviewing their great grandparents, people who could talk about just the way that things were. And what I kept hearing in those stories, those oral histories, which are just, verbatim, that porch story, right? Like what people said word for word, talking about how things were, was that they felt, and it was true. There was an attack on the self-esteem of their children during this segregation time. And so people were trying to, during this Jim Crow that was saying, you can't drink from this water fountain, you can't eat here, you can't walk here, you got to get off the street here. The elders in the community could tell that this was going to shred their children's souls to be seeing themselves as less than. It wasn't only that, the white community was seeing them as less than, they were seeing themselves that way. And so there was this mass and sort of amazing effort to like shore up that self-esteem. And I just found that so touching that in every story, every grandparent, every parent was concerned, how does my kids see themselves in this time of segregation? And that's why I had to bring in these mirrors. What do my girls see when they look in the mirror at this time?
Wow.
And I noticed you named one of them, Charlie, which is that like a ode to your brother, sort of?
Oh yeah.
I say your brother's name Charlie, but they're
That's
two
a good.
girls.
That's a good reading.
I saw that.
That's a good reading. Her real name is Charlene.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yes. And her grandmother would never call her Charlie.
Okay. All right. Well, I didn't know. I find it to be really fascinating. And there have been other books written from the vantage point of biracial children that were separated, or different skin tones that were separated. And one that I read a couple of years ago, and the name of the book escapes me, but it's something half.
Yeah.
Something, The Vanishing Half. That story had it was actually, those were two children from dark-skinned mother and I think this was a light, really super light father, but the father, no, it was the other way around. The father was dark, but the father was no longer around. So she was raising both of them, and the one that could pass for white decided to leave and live as a white person. So that was really interesting. And then they end up meeting again in later on, years later, they end up meeting.
A funny story about that book, it came out like as a girl, I was really interested in sort of white passing representation, because I was trying to make sense of like, what is my deal? I did not know. And there was not always a lot. There was Nella Larsen's Passing.
Yes.
We didn't have the movie at the time, unfortunately.
Well, I read the book. The book, I believe, is much better than the movie, but I like the fact that they attempted to recreate the story with the movie, because it is interesting.
Yeah, it is interesting, but I do agree with you about the book, but it was kind of like, other than that, there wasn't all that much until The Vanishing Half. But I was writing Mirror Girls when that book came out, and my mother told me, don't read it. I know you want to, but don't read it, because you don't want your idea. Exactly. And so the day I turned this book in to my publisher, I sat down and I read The Vanishing Half. And it's everything people say it is. It's just a wonderful piece of literature.
It was a really good book. But reading somebody else's book doesn't always influence you. In fact, for me, if I read a book, I might get influenced by the great writing style, the turn of a phrase, or the way they develop the character just generally, but I don't want my story to sound like anybody else's story. Some people will copy. I've known people that basically just copied somebody's story, but that's really not a good idea. Because people will pick up on it, and you don't gain anything like that. You want your stuff to be fresh and original. And, as much as things can be, because, they're saying there's nothing new under the sun. But when you're writing, you can create something completely original in your mind and put it on paper that's not written anywhere else. But I guess it could influence a person, but I just admire good writing. So when I read something that's really good, I want to make sure that my writing is really good. You know,
Yeah, I agree with you. And when I write, I do try to read a lot because I feel like it makes you a little more fluent. And I do think there's something just kind of inside all of us that, our soul or whatever it is that we're putting out there that is going to keep it original and different. It probably says more about my mother. No, I'm just kidding.
well, she was probably trying to protect you. Moms are always in a protective
yes.
mode, and to make sure that you didn't get in any trouble for plagiarism or anything like that.
Oh yes, she
But-
was, and she also, she was writing back in the 80s. She's been writing since the 80s.
What kind of
and
writing
so
did she do?
So she now she writes for children, for middle grade readers. Her sort of biggest book was Ghost Boys. And she also wrote Ninth Ward about Hurricane Katrina and Tower Smalling. She writes sort of, it's historical fiction for kids, combined with an adventure story that tends to deal with really heavy issues. But when I was a kid, what she was writing was adult historical fiction. And actually, I remember she took me on a research trip to Tulsa. She wrote a book called Magic City that was about what happened in Tulsa, the race massacre. And at the time when that book came out, in the 90s, I think it was, people refused to review it. And she said, I tried to tell the truth and nobody wanted to hear it. Washington Post sent it back. Nobody wanted to hear it. And it was actually just reissued just 2 years ago. And she was, to her, that was like a miracle because this was her second book. She poured her heart and soul into it. I remember we went into the courthouse in Tulsa. They were having a KKK meeting that day. She pulled me out of school. I was just a baby girl. and she said, well, look, when you go on a field trip with your mom, you get to see the KKK.
Wow.
And she worked so hard to get the documents and everything she needed. It was completely historically, informed. And she would say for years that was her best book, and talking about how things get buried, right? That it just wasn't a time that people could read it. So I think for her, some of this advice comes from a place of, she was one of the pioneers, and you want to dot all your I's and cross all your T's,
Well, I can see that she influenced you in that you want to write about these real issues, but you're doing it in such a way where you're influencing young adults as well.
Yeah, that's very important to me. I try to sort of educate a little bit, and I also try to represent. It's important, I think, for mixed race kids to see themselves. When I was growing up, even in that sort of milieu that I was in, where I had a mother who was a writer and I was watching a woman tell her stories, there wasn't that much material available where you could find mixed race families. And now we have so much more of that. And that is my biggest sort of goal, is I want to contribute to that, because I think it's very easy as a kid, a person of color of any kind, to feel alone in literature.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, you're to be congratulated for your work. It sounds like a very, very interesting story. It sounds like the kind of story I would like to read. I'm not a young adult reader, but it sounds like the kind of story I like. So I'm going to pick up a copy for myself and give it a whirl and leave a review. So can you show your book again? Because we're at the end of our time. And it's called Mirror Girls. And you have a couple of other books as well. And you have a book coming out. So
I do. This is, Mirror Girls is my second book, and she will be out in paperback in February if we have readers who prefer to get the paperback, which frankly, I do. But any version you want, there's an audiobook. And then in May, I have a book coming out called Your Plantation Prom Is Not Okay.
Well, we did put your Amazon link in the chat. And if you'd like to share your website, we can put that in the chat as well.
That would be great. You can find me at kellymcwilliamsauthor.com, and my contact information is there. Please, viewers, anyone who wants to reach out and email, I would love it.
Okay, and that's Kelly McWilliams author.
That's right, .com.
Okay.
Okay, well, Kelly, thank you so much for being a guest on Black Authors Matter TV, and congratulations on the success of your book.
Thank you so much for having me. This was an absolute treat.
Well, thank you for being here. I really enjoyed hearing about your story, and I'll be looking forward as well.
Thank you. Thank you.
Take care.
Okay, so we have 2 books to give away before we bring on our next guest. The first one is called Play the Game. It's by Charlene Allen. It's a young adult fiction book. And the trivia question for this book, Charlene Allen, the author received her law degree from which university? So the author's name is Charlene Allen. The book is called Play the Game. It comes out at the end of this month. So this is an advanced reading copy. And for tonight, we're also giving away another copy of Family Business 2, a hardcover. We had some extra ones. So for this book by Carl Weber, it's a series and it's also a TV show. For this book, what is the last name of the family that's central to the Family Business series? So if you answer that correctly, you get the hardcover of this book. So our next guest is a professor, and he's also an author, and he's written a book. I believe it's a memoir, but if it's not, he'll correct me. And the name of the book is called Shelter. The subhead is A Black Tale of Homeland Baltimore, and his name is Lawrence Jackson. So when he comes on screen, we will welcome him to Black Authors Matter TV.
And there he is.
Yes. So welcome to Black Authors Matter TV, Lawrence Jackson. To Black Authors Matter TV. And if you can turn off whatever device you have.
I had the Facebook feed on. Gotcha.
Yeah, there's a 6-second delay on sound on the Zoom Facebook. So welcome to the show and congratulations on your new book.
Thanks for having me. It's a joy to be here. Happy New Year.
And Happy New Year
to you.
Happy
Now,
Emancipation Day, as we say.
Okay. Now, is your book a memoir? I thought, from what I read, it seemed like a memoir. But
Yeah, sure, it certainly has memoir elements. It's 7 essays, and I'm the center of attention at most of them and at most points. So I think technically you could call it a memoir, but it's also, a collection of essays, and it works with the Christian calendar. So it's a celebration also of the feast days, beginning with Advent and then concluding at the end of the Christian church year.
Oh, okay. Now, why did you tie those 2 things together? What inspired you to do that?
Well, so the book is called Shelter, and it really is a reflection on fatherhood and attempting to provide shelter for my children and to pass on a legacy to the children. And I feel like the most important thing that I do for them, besides provide food, clothing, and shelter, is I try to give them a sense of their family and their heritage and their belonging. And I do that, and I have done that traditionally by continuing the religious tradition that I was brought up in, which is in the Black Episcopalian Church. So I lived in Atlanta, Georgia, where my sons were born, and we were going to a church called St. Paul's. And here in Baltimore City, we go to St. James Church. St. James Church in Lafayette Square is the first Black Episcopalian church that's headed in the United States, and that's in 1824. So next year, we'll celebrate our bicentennial. So much of the work really has to do about sort of recovering and maintaining the history, really the rich history of African Americans in American cities.
That's very interesting. And because I was actually going to ask, you said the book is kind of about fatherhood, and I was wondering how the city of Baltimore tied into that.
I grew up in Baltimore,
Mhm.
so I returned here in 2016, and really the story, that's how it opens. I'm sort of coming back, and the children are actually taking examinations for a school. Because I don't know, sort of what Baltimore is an amazing place. And again, it really was the foundation. It's important to remember that Baltimore is the foundation of free Black communities prior to the Civil War. The largest number of free Black people living in urban America are living in Baltimore, prior to the Civil War. So it's such a significant place for our history. But for a number of reasons, some of them having to do with political leadership. I'm like incredibly critical about the elected political class in the book and in the some of the journalistic work that I do. I feel like we need, everybody has their own lane. We need the critics to hold the politicians. We need to hold their feet to the fire. They work better when they're getting criticism, and they're not working better when we're saying you're doing a great job. And that's why everybody has a role. Some people, maybe your role is to say you're doing a great job. My role is to say, we need more, we need more. But the community here, again, sometimes it's political leadership. Of course, it really is also massive financial disinvestment at an extraordinary scale following the collapse of the Great Society programs in the 1960s. And then many of us in the community, we believe also what must be systematic targeting programs by the police and the organized drug cartels, so that we have so much. We have an extraordinary amount of narcotics in Baltimore. And again, since the late 1960s, and of course, we all know the story of the Vietnam veterans and the returning veterans and what happens in Black communities in the early 1970s. And, I really try to face that legacy of a person, the Yoruba term, Omawale, the son who has returned, the person who is coming back to a community that has produced him, right? I go to college because I get a scholarship from the church. The street that I grew up on in Baltimore, I would say probably like half the guys went into the police force and half the guys went out to the street corners. And I've really struggled to describe that reality to people without using cliches, and it's very sad, actually. Because even though Black people can be so front and center in American media, athletes and entertainers, our stories and our lives actually are not very well known. But I was just going to say that I received like an incredible amount of support in the community that I grew up in. A good friend of mine who lived nearby, who is no longer with us, but he used to always, he was joking, but he was also somewhat serious. He would always say to me, "Oh, Larry, you're a genius, and what's the genius doing? And how are you making things better for everyone else? And how are you being serious about your studies and that kind of thing?" And so when you return, you have an obligation, and it's a complex obligation. But I'll just say, I know that you'll have questions, and I'm a professor, right? So I can run on with them.
You started teaching, so I said we're just going to sit and listen.
No, but the story, really, the arc of what I was trying to do with the essays is to talk about what some responsible obligations might look like, and the one that I've taken on. And of course, it has to be, for me, it has to be a place where joy meets duty, and where, sort of my academic or intellectual reflection also meets, my creative passion. So I have an annual jazz concert that's in the square where my church is. And the church is about Lafayette Square.
No,
the church is about.
When is it?
Oh, it's the Saturday after Labor Day. So we'll be going into our 5th year, this year, 2023, September the 9th, 2023. If anybody is in the Delaware, Maryland, Virginia area, please come out. It's a free jazz concert. It's a wonderful event. Absolutely
right
beautiful.
Down the street from you in Silver Spring, so I'm going to have to make it over.
Oh, we'll celebrate you, sister, if you can come out. That'll be great. We have a marvelous partnership with just an amazing cast of musicians from the Peabody Institute. Brother Nasser Abadi, who is a Washington, D.C. based musician. Brother Sean Jones, the director of jazz studies, formerly of Jazz at Lincoln Center, who is just an amazing trumpeter. But the idea was, what kinds of regular events can we plan and host that have the important cultural tradition that Black Americans pioneered at their center, but that also would be, important heritage moments where we would consistently and with a kind of not just regularity, but the sense of the obligation to our history, talk about the meaning and the stories behind, a particular kind of musical tradition. So we're actually performing music not very far from where Freddie Gray lost his life, or where he was captured by the police. But also it happens to be, not so very far from where Billie Holiday herself lived in 1924 and 1925, not so very far from where she was sexually assaulted. This is a community that also hosted Clarence Mitchell, the author of the Civil Rights Act, and Thurgood Marshall. I mean, I'm starting getting the cadence of Hakeem Jeffries now, right? You can't get away from it, and always, you gotta, remember the brother. But it's a remarkable community. Upton, Druid Heights, Sandtown, Marble Hill, and we want to celebrate that. We want to serve as an anchor for community events, for gatherings, and for inspiring intellectual work. And so what I try to do in the book Shelter is to talk about the nature of the contradiction that the pursuit of, in my case, I'm talking about, like wanting to be a solid member of the middle class, wanting to be a middle class person, wanting to have a certain caliber of education and lifestyle for your family. We owe the things, the obligations that we owe to the children that we produce are genuine, but that nonetheless, you are also participating in a often a larger economic system that does not have the interest of African people at its center, right? And obviously, right, it's not designed to do that. It's designed to have us at the bottom. So, it is working through those contradictions in each one of the essays, and then really trying to also describe some of the beauty of life and the things that help us to endure and to prosper and to thrive. And of course, that means pretty much at the conclusion of every one of the chapters, it's an emphasis on the human relationships.
Okay, well, I have a question, and I'm sure Rhonda does too. So, I haven't been to Baltimore in a long time, but the last time, or one of the last times I went, the port was thriving. They had done some refurbishment of the port, and there were there was a lot of hope with that. They had restaurants, and we went, ate, and sat out on the water, and it was just beautiful. And did that all kind of go away, or is it still functioning, or what happened to that?
So I am of the generation where we were handing out brochures and flyers when Harbor Place opened in 1980, 1981. And the mayor's office, had sort of collected numbers of young people, and they said, go and preach the gospel of urban renewal in Baltimore. And that was a project, Baltimore's Harbor Place, one of the nation's first examples of commercial waterside development. That was a project that was, it was spun out by really the same group of people, the Rouse Corporation, that had created the community between Baltimore and Washington, Columbia. That was the first planned interracial community really in the United States, sort of getting underway in the 1960s and 1970s. And I think that the lesson that we have taken from that urban planning and the use of public dollars to inspire entrepreneurial fortunes, and with the idea that the rising tide would lift all boats. And the tide metaphor is important because from that point, which is sort of like it is the terminus of the Patapsco River, like where it meets the land, or the one branch of it meets the land. But along the riverway in the city, there are two branches. there has been a massive continuation of development, to the point that myself, a native, if I got on a boat, if somebody blindfolded me and we got on a boat and we sailed up the Patapsco River and we stopped before we got to the Pavilions of Horror Place, I would think I was in, maybe a Miami, maybe even, like a Monaco or somewhere. I wouldn't have a strong sense of my geography. But what has happened is that the condominiums and the apartments, there some businesses, we are the home to the Under Armour sports company.
Mhm.
They have built up to north and south along the Riverway, and they have attracted some migrants, upwardly mobile, young white Americans. They have done almost next to nothing for our local population. And again, I would say probably about 1990, Baltimore was probably about 70-30 Black, white. And at that time, we were about, I think it would be about 800,000 people in the city. So instead of being able to build up the population to, again, educate, take people into the middle class, make home ownership, especially single family home ownership, to make that the byword for the city, almost the opposite has happened. And increasingly now we're at about 60-40 Black, white, and the population now goes between, sort of 570,000, sometimes over a little bit more than 600,000. But we have attritioned off our population. We have maintained, and it really is for about 40 years now. And in some ways, it could be longer. The highest homicide rates were in the early 1970s. We have, as you know, first-class emergency medical facilities here throughout the city, right? So, there are dramatic things that can take place to preserve life. University of Maryland shock trauma, Johns Hopkins. But nonetheless, we are having a homicide rate here of like 330 people every year. I mean, with the brief exception in the like around 2010, 2008. But I'm saying this to say that the quality of life for African Americans has really not improved, and it's not been sustained. So these developmental or development projects, again, using the public dollar to try to attract capital, and then to try to attract affluent white migrants, sort of from either side of the metropolitan area, and to lure them for brief periods of time for, whatever it is, restaurants or this spectacle entertainment with these stadiums, the Ravens and the Orioles. And I like athletics, participate in athletics. I'm not trying to diminish the importance of athletics, but these are stadiums that are financed with public tax relief, with bonds that are raising money to be able to keep these sports teams in place. Excuse me. And what we really don't see is the impact on the creation of a Black middle class, or the improvement of the public school system, or any lessening in the incredible amount of, sort of deadly street violence. 5 young people were shot on Thursday of last week. 1 young person was killed. 1 young person is in critical condition. I think the other young people have been released. They are leaving their high school to get chicken at Popeyes and are shot in the middle of the afternoon. I wish that the urban planners were thinking about, sort of transforming the entirety of the city, rather than, sort of the focus on turning Baltimore into like the Riviera for Washington, D.C., bedroom community kind of a thing. But, I'm maybe you struck a sore nerve, but,
Well, I asked the question I wanted the answer. So, and you gave me a detailed answer. So, Rhonda, what is your question?
Well, no, as I'm listening to you, I mean, I can see why I mean, and maybe I'm making a false comparison, but what I'm picturing is that this is the reason why it was important for you to tell this story, because you're uplifting fatherhood, but at the same time, you want your children to know their history. You want
Absolutely.
them to know what's going on around them. And that's what I'm picturing as I'm listening to you.
Absolutely. I really want to try to inspire myself and to inspire them to continue to try to work as effectively and as energetically as possible with the construction and the maintenance of institutions. One of the things that I'm most excited about, I created something called the Billie Holiday Center for Liberation Arts. That was how I could, sort of, I guess, people will always ask you, well, hey man, you're a successful author, or you're a distinguished professor, but what are you doing? What are you doing towards all of these other problems? And many people will just sort of shrug that off and say, well, I mean, I'm doing my scholarship, and that's the limit of it. But that was never satisfactory for me, because again, like I say, I'm actually a product of the Black community in West Baltimore, Northwest Baltimore. My mother grew up, was educated in this community. My grandparents migrated in the 1930s from the Tobacco South. My father migrated in the early 1950s from the Tobacco South. And segregation had us all in, one community, or along a couple of boulevards in one community. But there were institutions that sustained us. And again, that's part of the reason for the religious overlay in some of the chapters, is because the church was such an important one. The educational institutions, really a backbone. And so I said, well, I wanted to see what I could do in terms of like trying to work with this educational institution that employs me and has a history of injustice towards people of African descent. And so that's what the Billie Holiday Center for Liberation Arts tries to do. A couple of things. One of them is to preserve the historical record. So we actually have trained archivists who go to African American churches and community groups and help people, learn about what professional archivists do to, sort of transcribe or digitize, a tape cassette or a video, or, different kinds of print material that have been, maintained or preserved over many years. When you think about Baltimore, people don't often reflect that the Mother Bethel Church of Philadelphia, when the African Methodist Episcopal denomination is being chartered, that at those meetings in 1814, you have 5 people from Philadelphia and 6 people from Baltimore. And that Daniel Coker is going to be the first elected bishop. He turns it over to Richard Allen and says, Brother Richard, I think you should take the church, or, let's vote again, and maybe it'll be Richard Allen. But this is a community that has, some of the oldest, most historic Black churches. And so we really have tried to sink our roots in deep with so much of the rich history of the place, and to do some work into recovering it and maintaining it. And then, to offer a place for artists in residence and an elder in residence, and to keep reminding people that, that the oral history is significant and needs to be, sort of recovered and protected, recorded and made available. And that it's not about, sort of removing things from circulation, maybe the old model, you sort of lose your diary or your letters or your scrapbook or your photographs or something, but rather it's about multiplying and amplifying the impact of these documents, these heirlooms, this print material culture, so that the entire community can learn and progress and try to move forward. So that's an institutional mechanism that I got underway, and one of my partners is Reverend Al Hathaway, who was the former minister of the Union Baptist Church, Union Baptist Church was founded here and was founded by a person named Harvey Johnson, who was one of the founders also of the Liberty League, which is a forerunner to the NAACP. So again, this powerful free Black community, and then post-Civil War Black community that was always putting these important structures together. Booker T. Washington visits Baltimore in 1900, and it's like, this is the most prosperous group of Black Americans as homeowners and institution builders of any place in the United States. And I hope that heritage is going to be strong. The back of that heritage is strong enough for us to be able to stand on it today. But anyway, you know, I'm just trying to, in a small way, like trying to participate in that and have folk reflect on that.
Well, I can see that you're probably, this is about that time of year when everybody really wants to know more about Black history. I would think that, you know, this is going to be your time to really spread that message. I mean, I know you're doing it throughout the year, but you really have that willing ear during the month of February.
And you have a lot of information that you've connected that people may have bits and pieces of, but not the big picture or a bigger picture. Now, do you have a copy of your book so we can see the cover? Because we like people to know what the cover looks like. And you have a door on your cover. And what's the significance of the door?
Well, of course, we have to have, this would be the door of return. You know, we would turn in the corner. We studied the proverb, and, you know, we have the Sankofa bird, and we are returning. But that's actually that's my front door. And the story with the front door is that, you know, we wanted to strip the paint off of the front door. We wanted to put a nice stain on the front door. And my son is actually just in the other room. Bubba, come over here so they can see.
You
but
did the vintage sin that every Black parent does. Come over and tell everybody hi. Tell the people hi.
But we really have had some wonderful moments, you know, sort of doing woodworking. And he's making his college applications right now. That's what he's doing.
Wonderful.
Oh, well, good for him. Where does he want to go? Where does he really want to go?
Well, I would tell you, the number one school, Nathaniel's a football player, and his number one school right now is the University of Pennsylvania, and he wants to see if they will have him to play football. This is another conversation, but
okay.
We have a good family friend, Brother Michael Hanshard, who is a political scientist there, and we met with him one afternoon, and he really put the bug of University of Pennsylvania in Nathaniel's ear. So,
well, that, you know, meeting someone, I know that happened with my daughter. When she went to visit NCCU, the dean of the business school happened to be there that day and took her on a tour and sold her on the school when she was 14. So that was it. And that's where she went. And that's where she graduated from. So
shout out to Central and Brother Arwin Smallwood, my dear friend, who was the chairman at North Carolina A&T, but the greatest Central advocate of all time.
All right.
Yeah. So I have one more question because we have like 1 minute left. But everybody knows about the show The Wire. And I probably asked this question kind of late in the interview, but it was based in Baltimore.
Sure.
And how accurate is that in terms of the effects of the drug culture?
Oh, so, I mean, you know, David Simon set the bar for portraits of urban realism in the United States. And the thing that he has said before, and is absolutely true, is that no one ever gives him credit for creating the most diverse television show of all time, right? You don't have any other examples where you have that many African-American actors featured on a program, and then so many people getting their start there. Michael B. Jordan, you know, and many others. Mike, the critique that I have of the show, you said, how accurate is it? Is that, again, so Lawrence Jackson went to Baltimore City Public School from pre-kindergarten through 8th grade. And those, the experiences that I had there in those classrooms prepared me to win scholarships to go to Jesuit high school, win scholarships to go to college and earn a PhD. And I never saw in those, they spent a whole season on the public education, and I didn't see any of the inspired Black women teachers. I mean, I'm not saying that they completely ignored it, but the Black women who were the backbone of that school system, I didn't see them appear in that. And again, I felt like the idea that there might be Black middle-class people living in Baltimore was also absolutely eradicated. And, you know, we have a lot of pride about the city and living in the city and being in the city. And I felt like oftentimes when white Americans look at our lives, they think that at the very best, we want to be just like them. So the people that migrated to the suburbs would be, you know, the ones who would make more sense, or, you know, that would sort of be an ordinary, a normal pattern or something. And I felt like that was a way that the show, you know, had sort of missed the mark. But I wouldn't gainsay its national significance.
Yeah, it was a very well done show in terms of just the writing and the acting, and it grabbed you. It was very raw. They did have the one teacher that I only, because I haven't seen it in a while, but they had that one teacher that was like the love interest of the guy who had gotten out of prison, was trying to get on the straight and narrow, and he was trying to reconnect with her, but she
had moved to the county and become fake. That was the whole thing. That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. Right. She had moved to the county.
Now that sounds like that struck a nerve with you.
He had moved on. That's all. You know, he had been in prison. How long had he been behind bars? Like, how long was she supposed to wait? So that, and then, you know, they had police officers. They were middle class, but you never saw them really.
You didn't get to see the home life
at
of
home,
Monk Johnson,
except the one whose wife didn't support him, and then he ended up with a white woman. That's a whole nother story. But I think I've seen it twice all the way through, but I haven't seen it lately. So it's one of the ones that I'm probably going to go back and rewatch because it was very excellently done. And Wendell Pierce was a featured author at the National Black Book Festival several years ago. And I met him at the Image Awards one year and got to ask him directly about being a featured author. And I told him I really liked him as Bunk in that show. So he came to Houston as a featured author. That was, I don't know what year it was. I want to say 6 or 7 years ago, maybe. But he was, you know, very approachable, and he was great in his role in that show. So thank you for being a guest on Black Authors Matter TV, and congratulations on your book and your commitment to fatherhood. That's very important.
You will have a nice evening, and thank you so much. It was great to spend some time with you.
Okay, you too.
Hearing your stories as well, and since I'm right down the street from you, I'd love to stay connected.
It'll be nice.
Yes. Okay. And Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
All right. Take care. Bye-bye.
Okay. We're going to be bringing on our next guest, and she's in the waiting room now, but we do want to say who won the books. And Tony Bonita, I was looking at Tony Bonita won both books. Tony, kudos to you. You get both books. They'll be on the way to you. And again, Lydia Brew won the book that we missed it last week. So she is going to be getting her book as well. So we mentioned to you all about the J. Pinkney Children's Book Awards. We had the first one in 2022, and there were 5 winners. And among those people, there was one grand prize winner, but there were 5 winners in the different categories. And we've had 2 guests on. This is our 3rd guest that was a winner, Michelle Daley. And Michelle, congratulations again on being a winner, and welcome to Black Authors Matter TV.
Thank you. Thank you. Happy New Year.
Same to you.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasant surprise, being a first-time author and publishing 2 books within 6 months, and both being bestsellers, and both were nominated to be
For the
finalists,
finalists. Mhm.
and one book winning. I remember seeing the post on Facebook, and I literally had to close the window and then open it back up because I just couldn't believe
To
that.
make sure that it was real.
Yes, just to make sure it was real, but it's a blessing.
Well, I would say kudos to you for not only writing 2 books in such a short period of time, but doing them with excellence to where they've become bestsellers and award winners. Is this something that you were very intentional about doing? Because I'll tell you, there are people who can do 2 books in 6 months and you're not going to be the quality because they're rushing through them. It sounds like you were very intentional about everything that you did about your books.
Yes, definitely. First of all, I want to say it's wanting to be an author is something that I've always wanted to do for years. And I continuously just made sure I was intentional. I putting it on my vision board. I just kept it in my focus. This is what I want to do, not having any idea how to do it, where to start, but just praying about it, putting my vision board and saying every year, this is what I'm going to do. And actually what happened, we all have social media. And I remember one Sunday evening opening Instagram and saw this one gentleman that was just praying and playing spiritual music. And I really stopped there and just started listening to him. And after getting off my social media that night, I remember being in tears, because of the whole experience. The following Sunday, did the same thing again. He popped up on my social media. And then after he went through the whole experience, he talked about a workshop, which is called Write a Legacy on Instagram, which he actually helps individuals to go through the whole process. At first, I was skeptical because, of course, nowadays you have to be kind of careful, who you reach out to, who you ask for help. And I prayed about it. And a couple of days later, I stepped out on faith, contacted this person. Come to find out, we're both graduates of Morgan State University. Come to find out, we have similar friends in the same circle. Come to find out, he's part of Kappa Alpha Psi. I'm a member of Delta Sigma Theta. So instantly we realized this was really a divine intervention and a purpose for, first of all, me being patient and being focused on what I wanted to do, and then being able to connect with him. So going through his workshop, Write a Legacy, gave me the opportunity to really learn about the whole aspect and even being a self-publisher, and then, becoming a bestseller for both of my books. So that's my whole purpose, and that's how my process really started.
Well, speaking of process, well, it looked like you were about to say something. I'll let
No.
you go. No, Gwen, were you about to say something?
Well, I was going to say that she won in the educational category, and that category had a lot of submissions. Some of the categories had a relative few. The 2 that had the most were educational and motivational. And there were, I want to say, at least 50 books. So we had to narrow it down to 5 and then narrow it down to 1. And it wasn't easy, but your book, I See Me in You, which is that's not the one you have on the, that's the other, the one you have on the wall.
Yeah. Yes, I See Me in You is this one.
That one is that one. Oh, you have the sticker on there.
Yes. I made sure as soon as I got them, I put them all on the books.
That's great. That book stood out because it was the message of the book about the adults saying the children are reflections. It was, and you were intentional about letting the children who were depicted in the book know they could be, whatever they imagine they could be. And there were some other books that were similar, but it's all about how you tell the story, how the illustrations connect with the words. Sometimes people, when they write a story for children's books, they don't understand the pictures and the words have to go together as the flow. Yes, it's for children, but it still has to make sense. It has to flow from a logical progression of concepts to the end, even though it's for children. And so congratulations again. You were, I want to tell you, it was a very competitive category that you were in, and your book stood out. And see, we don't know who's new. I was on the judging panel. We don't know who's new and who's established, because the books are taken one at a time. They're evaluated on the merits of the individual book. And so we didn't know you were a first-time author. So that's amazing. Sometimes when you just step out there and say, I'm going to do something, really great things happen. And just think, if you had held back and you hadn't done it, all these great things wouldn't have happened for you.
I truly agree. And I will mention to you, the concept of the book actually just came about one day. I just thought about it because going through the pandemic, and even before the pandemic, you have children hearing such negative things, either about themselves or about their people, So I just had the vision of wanting to create something where children would see themselves in a positive light. And that's why I purposely had the depiction of the picture of inventors and scientists and politicians, and especially inventors of things that children would see around their home, that they had no idea that someone that looks like them actually invented these things that they use on a daily basis. And I was hoping that when children see that, they will get a different kind of experience and feeling for themselves that, I came from something great, and not just continuously hearing negative things about people that look like them.
And I think often, and that's why I have such a problem, and a joke is a joke, people like jokes, but when we make jokes and we always make ourselves the bottom of that joke. When we talk about how, Black people are always broke, or Black people don't do this. And when we perpetuate these negative stereotypes of ourselves, in the interest of saying it was a joke, what we're doing is we're actually putting these messages in our young people, and they grow up feeling that way, that we can't be more. And so I love it when we can actually have books and other media that actually show us in a better light, that we can do just as much as anybody else can. We don't always have to be the tail. We can be the head sometimes.
Exactly. And it's such a small message, but it gives a big, really, it's really small, but it's powerful.
Right.
As children are sponges. They learn from things that we do, things that we say. And so, a simple thing like a book, first of all, putting the image of people that look like them is even more powerful than you can even think about it, because a lot of our kids don't see themselves as characters in the book. And one thing I've been hearing from a lot of people who have purchased my book, people that I know and people that I don't know, who have sent me emails or saying, my niece or my daughter or my son or my neighbor really likes the book because they see themselves in the book. And that was the intent of it. Because a lot of our books in schools, we know a lot of our books in the, in libraries and schools, in the curriculum, a lot of characters don't look like our kids. So they're reading the book, just reading the words and not getting a connection with who the character is and really learning from it. So that was part of the whole concept of me thinking about when I was writing, when I'm writing my books. And I actually wrote about 6 or 7 books over the pandemic. So it's like, when I started with one, the floodgates open, and all my books have
coming down the pipe.
Exactly. The concepts kept coming, the ideas kept coming, and all my books have brown or Black children in them so they can see themselves in a book.
Now, one of the judges, who was a fellow judge on the panel, Mary Evans, she said, we don't research the book nor the authors when we judge. Like I said, we just take the books one at a time and we judge them in that moment. And we have a scale from 1 to 5 that we give each book. And then each judge gives the rating, and then we add them up. So one judge may give a book a higher rating than another, but in general, and I'll say probably across the board, the ones who won pretty much had 5s across the board from every judge. And so, because sometimes we disagreed on some books, so one judge might say it was a 3,
Right.
and another judge might say it's a 4, and another one might say it's a 1. I was probably one of the toughest among the judges. And
No,
that was
not you,
a laugh.
never.
That was a laugh. But I just believe you should do your best. And this is I took the award very seriously in terms of this. The people who are winning the award will be representing the award for a year.
Mhm.
So the winners needed to be representative.
Mhm.
So that's probably one of my motivations for just being tough. But if it was great, it was great. I get, I'll give a 5 if it's a 5, but I don't just give 5s. I don't do, pity votes. Anyway, that's
You have to earn it.
That's but now what motivated you to enter your book? Because I know as an author, I've entered competitions, and some I've placed, and some have I ever won? Like outright, I've been a finalist, I've been like a nominee. I have, but I haven't won yet. So what motivated you to send it in? Because some
Actually,
people are skeptical or hesitant, they're scared. And what made you go for it?
I think after stepping out on faith with the book initially, actually I had someone who actually told me about this award. And then I had other friends who started telling me about the award because they started to see, the great things from the book, how people were, really enjoying it. And when I received the nomination form, I said, I'm going to do it again. This is what you do. You're supposed to do. You're supposed to step out on faith, and God would do the rest. And he's never failed me. He's always surprised me. So I just was like, I just do what he told me to do. And that's why I said, when I actually won, I was like, no, this is not real. I have to close the window again. I got to open it back up. And I was like, no, it's not real. And I closed it again. I opened it back up. And I was like, okay, God, all right, this is it. And from there, I started getting other friends sending me other book award nomination, forms, to a contest to fill out. And so for me, I'm just going to keep doing this because I feel that now I've been placed in a space where I feel so comfortable, and I feel that, ideas come to me once I just think about it. Also, the fact that I'm an educator at heart. I've been in education for 27 years. So I know what it's like to be in the classroom. I know what it's like to see children when they don't see characters that look like them in the book. Then on the flip side of it, I know what that feels like also. So I know what it feels like to see children when their face light up, when they see characters that look like them in the book. And so for me, all my books that I've written so far, and I think I have 6 or 7, so I still have more to go. So I may be entering more contests for Jerry Pinkney. All of them have Black characters in there. And when I was writing the book, I don't know if I'm pretty sure you do, Rudine Sims Bishop. She has a powerful framework that's called Mirrors, Windows, and Sliding Door. So when I'm writing my books, I think about it because when you think of mirrors and children with books, you think how the fact that they kind of see their own lives reflected in the pages of the book, that's for the mirrors.
Okay.
When you think of windows, you think that the book really allowed the reader to view their lives and the story in a different, that's different from their own. Mm-hmm. And then when you think of sliding doors, you think of how the reader feel that they can transport themselves into the world of the story. And so they can connect themselves to the story and to the characters. So when I'm writing a book, I'm thinking of those 3 things. How is a child going to reflect themselves when they look at the page? How are they going to look through the window to see something different? And then how they're going to actually transport their feelings in connecting with the character. This is it's a very powerful concept because our children really, they don't really see themselves in books. They don't engage in books or encounter books, especially like in the curriculum or in school libraries, that really reflect their own racial identity. So, these books that we write that have Black or brown characters in them, it really gives them an opportunity to connect with themselves. The books that they have access to are largely window books in the world, because it looks into the lives of other people that are
Okay.
predominantly white characters. Or you may see a lot of books that have animals. You don't see a lot of books that have us. And I remember seeing a research that was done, I think it was like in 2018 or 2019, that talked about 27% of children books published in that year featured animals as main characters, which were more books featuring non-white characters combined.
I was just going to say that often if we do see our non-white characters, they become an animal, or
Yep.
they become unreal. A lot of people had problems with Princess and the Frog because she was a frog for almost the entire movie. And then I cannot remember the name of the movie where a Black man was the main character, but he basically turned into a blue ghost, and he was a blue ghost for the entire movie.
I can't think of it, but I know exactly.
Yeah, I can't remember the name of the movie, but that's a lot of people had problems with these movies because Black people can't just be in the movie, that
Right.
they have to turn into something, or if something happens to them, they can't actually be that hero throughout the entire movie.
Yeah, after my daughter turned like 12, because I saw every children's movie made like from when she was 3. We went to every single children's movie until she was 12. Then she wanted to, decide to go to movies. So I didn't see any more kids movies after that. So the one you're mentioning, I don't, the one I didn't go to because she was past 12, I guess, when that came out. But it is true, people, I don't know if it's an oversight or intentional. I don't know. But when they create these animations and just movies and stories about children, and I guess people basically put themselves in books, but they don't think about who I'm excluding, or how do other children perceive this? They just consider themselves to be the default.
Right.
And everybody should be able to see it from their point of view, or through their eyes, like you say, looking through a mirror. And it seems like by now people would know better, but it doesn't seem like they really have learned anything from the past. Every generation seems like it does the same thing. It's getting a little better, but not as much as one would think it should in 2023.
Right.
And that's one of the reasons why we started doing the award, because Black children's authors, and there are a lot of Black educators and parents writing books now, but you would hardly know it from the dominant culture, So I'm of a mind, we can't sit around and wait for other people to recognize us. We have to recognize ourselves. And so that's why we started the award, because even if they do it, normally if they do it, it's always temporary. They'll change for 1 or 2 years, and then it's back to the way it was. They just slip back into the old habits.
It's just very, what I just talked about and everything that we're saying, it's a problem. And we know that it is a problem, but it's like, what are we going to do to fix the problem? And I think because, and I hate to say it, that we're so far behind, it's going to take a while for us to really try to even catch up. But will we ever catch up? Will we ever be, equal to the amount of like literature that we're really putting out, with our children in there? The only thing I could say is that the ones who are doing it is to be more intentional,
Right.
Mhm.
to make sure that you're doing so. Making sure that you're writing books with brown and black children and that the books are getting in the hands of those children. Because that's the key. You can write it can go on the shelf, but you want to make sure it's getting in schools, it's getting in libraries, it's getting in homes, and children are reading those books because it really makes a difference.
Yeah, getting them into the schools and into the hands of the children is a challenge. Unless, parents will buy them for their children,
Right.
but then you're not reaching the rest of the children, the larger general population of children. And to get into those, a lot of times you have to know somebody.
Mhm.
It takes a while. Like to get into a school system,
Mhm.
I don't know what that takes. I've known some people who did it, and most of the people I know had some sort of connection.
Right.
They had a friend that they had known for a long time. And you don't want to get in trouble, because there was one mayor of a city that forced the school system to order all her books, well, order all of the students to order her book. And she got in trouble for that, because that's not
Mhm.
legal. I think she may have gone to jail for that.
Yeah, she's
So you
here.
have to be careful
Yes,
to
you
do
have
it on the up and up.
Yes, that's my next step. I'm hoping I can get it in schools. And one thing I'm hoping that teachers will take advantage on reading or having students read this book other than Black History Month.
Yeah.
That's when
Mhm.
they want to read Black books.
Yeah. Yeah. But it needs to be a year-round thing,
Exactly.
But we got to start somewhere.
Exactly.
Maybe see, now we can kind of use January and February, because you got Martin Luther King's birthday. So
Mhm.
you start with those 2 months, and then you take the rest of the spring semester, try to continue it along. You just have to stay at it. But it is very promising in that there are a lot more African-American authors writing children's books there's than ever I've seen. And I've been in the book business for 20 years. It's more now. And I guess it's easier now to not only self-publish, but to find your own illustrator. Some things align, like certain things have to be available to be able to do it. And the illustrator is one of them. And now you can find illustrators online. They don't have to be in your city. You don't have to know them. You can, people are bidding on work or presenting their work, where you can find an illustrator.
Mhm.
So those things are happening now to make it easier for people to self-publish the children's books. And then some of the publishers are publishing books too, but it's like an explosion in the self-published area.
Yes, definitely. One key thing you talked about is the illustrator. If one advice I can give to anyone who wants to be an author is to please get an illustrator that is going to make your book really pop. You know what I mean? Because I had one before and I learned the hard way, which was the expensive way, and had to find someone, because children, when they see a book, they look through the colors and the pictures first. They look through that first before they start reading the book. And even
Yes.
adults, sometimes we do that to ourselves. We want to look through and see what it looks like. So it's very important that it's not just the words in the book, but also the pictures that will make the book.
You're right. So show us a copy of the book again. I See Me in You,
Okay.
the one that you won the award for, and any of the other books that you want to show us. But that was the winner in the educational category. And
And
you submitted another book, that one, Welcome Home Lennox.
yes,
And that was about the dog, I think, wasn't it?
yes.
Okay.
This was about a little boy learning to learn how to earn things that he really wants by using character traits and connecting his character traits and good things that he does in school and at home with the character traits in order for him to earn something that he really wants.
Oh, okay. All right.
This was the finalist for the motivational.
Right. And then motivational, as I said, the educational and motivational, those were the two categories that had a huge amount of submissions. And so you were a finalist in 2 different categories with 2 different books. So that was amazing.
Thank
I mean,
you.
you know, we, as Mary said, we judge each book on its merits.
Mhm.
And so if an author sent us a book in 5 different categories, if it didn't pass the test, it didn't make the cut, regardless of how many books they sent in. You know, some people, you know, try to hedge their bets, so to speak, by submitting in like 5 different categories the same book. But it's about the book itself. So it had to rise to the top in terms of presentation, and yours did. So congratulations again.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity. I really appreciate it.
And continue success with your books that you're going to be doing, that you have a lot on your plate coming up. So much success with those.
Thank you so much, and look out for my next submission for 2023.
Love it.
Okay, all right.
Hey, thank you.
Happy New Year, and we'll
Yeah.
see you soon.
All right, thank you. Take care. God bless.
Okay, you too.
Okay, bye-bye.
Okay, so we are at the final interview coming up with Kennedy Ryan in her awesome book. But I do want to mention, I want to mention again that my book about going to college debt-free with scholarships, the 2023 edition, is now available. This is a proof, because my personal shipment of books hasn't arrived yet, but the book is available now on Amazon in paperback and Kindle. So for those who want to go to college debt-free with scholarships, my book tells you how to do it.
Well,
And so,
congratulations, Gwen.
well, thank you. It comes out every January as a new revised edition. And so, so I'm excited about that. And we are welcoming our final guest, Kennedy Ryan. And Kennedy has a book that's really, she has a new book, but she has other books as well. But her latest book, Before I Let Go, has really done amazingly in terms of sales and reviews. I think you have like 1,200 reviews. And last time I checked Amazon, that's a lot of reviews. That means you had a lot of people who bought the book and read it. So welcome to Black Authors Matter TV. Uh-oh, we need to
There we
unmute.
go. Am I unmuted?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Hi, how are you? Thanks for
Hello.
having me.
You're
Thanks for being
welcome.
here.
You're
Sorry
welcome.
for the background. The background's kind of, we literally just moved into our house 2 days ago. And so
Oh.
we're still surrounded by boxes and.
Oh, well, at least you were able to unbox your laptop.
That is about all. That is about all. This is not even my office, so everything.
Well, congratulations on moving into your new home.
Thank you. Thank you.
And do you have a copy of your book with you? Since you had it in boxes, because I wanted people
somewhere, I think
somewhere.
they're all packed up. That would have been smart.
I wanted people to see the cover. So
I can pull it up on my phone.
There you go. Pull it up on your phone.
Okay,
I can do that.
Because the cover is amazing.
Literally all of my books are packed up. I'm so sorry.
Oh, I know how it is to move. That's why I haven't done it in a long time.
I mean, I remember moving and still being on the show.
Yeah,
in the background.
And some stuff, after you move, some things you never find. It's like they just vanish.
Right, right.
I'm hoping to. I don't want to move anytime soon. I don't want to move ever.
I think I hope I'm done. I hope I'm done.
I did put your website in the chat, so don't feel bad. People will be able to find you.
Yeah,
Okay,
but
awesome.
the cover of the book is totally amazing. And
I would typically have it right here, but again, I just
yeah, I understand.
I don't know.
There's the cover right there.
Yeah, that's it on Instagram. So
okay.
Typically I would have all my books behind me, but everything's still boxed up. Sorry.
No problem.
Okay.
So
I love the afro and
yes.
the
And all
The dots look like
the
lights in
colors.
her afro. Yeah.
Yes,
The colors are
we
beautiful.
took that cover. I worked collaborated really closely with the publisher, and it took us about 5 months to design that cover.
Wow.
It took a long time. But we went through all several iterations, but I really wanted it to be a beautiful Black woman on the cover. And I knew it was going to be, in airports and Target and places like that. And I was like, I really want us to see a beautiful Black woman on these shelves. And it was chosen by Good Morning America as a buzz book. And so they put it on their billboard in Times Square. And I was like, look at her, this gorgeous Black woman with her curly afro, dominating a billboard in Times Square for Good Morning America. It was really, really special. And it's exactly the kind of thing I envisioned when we worked really hard on this cover. So it's exactly what I wanted.
Well, congratulations on that.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Tell us about the story.
It is, if you wanted to put tropes to it, it's like a second chance romance. And it really straddles the fence between romance and women's fiction. I call it romantic women's fiction because there's definitely a romance at the heart, but it really leans hard into the woman's journey. The book is from both the hero and the heroine's point of view. But it deals a lot with, it's a divorced couple. They've been divorced for 2 years. We, as the readers know, they're still in love. They suffered great personal loss of his adoptive mom, who was like a second mom to her. And then she had a stillbirth. And those two things, and those are also content warnings for anyone for whom that might be triggering. But those two things happen really close together. And all of that is kind of off page and before we get to the story. And Yasmin goes into a pretty deep depression. And that's also before the story starts. By the time the story starts, they have divorced, but she's been in therapy and she's now on medication and she's on the up. And they start to he starts therapy, which he'd always been resistant to. But it's really a story about how they were really incompatible in their grief and in their loss and had a lot of healing and growing and evolving to do separately before they could come back together. They have 2 kids. It's set in Atlanta. So they're co-parenting. They own a restaurant there in Atlanta together. There's a friend group at the center who's super supportive. And it's obviously Black love. It's just a story that was very close to my heart, very personal for me because I was diagnosed with depression last year. And a lot of the things that I navigated in my own personal mental health journey really informed this story. And it's a funny story because, it's funny that I wrote the original version of this book 15 years ago, and I never intended to publish it. And my husband one day was like, he had read it. This is 15 years ago. Okay. And I never intended to publish it. And he was like, whatever happened to that story with the divorced couple? And I was like, oh, that story is no good. He's like, no, you should pull it out. It was really good. And I rewrote so much of it. It's like different character names, different title, so much. But I always kind of joke that this book was waiting for me to grow up. Because the original version had all the pain, but none of the healing. And I think because I had to navigate my own mental health journey, it gave me a real empathy and compassion for people who are navigating that. And I'm not sure that I would have had that in the same way if I had written this book before I did that. I've grown so much as a mom and as a wife and as a friend, and all of those experiences in the last decade and a half have really, buttressed this story in a way that it wouldn't have been before. So
that's what the attraction is for this book to have captured attention the way it has.
I don't know how if it has captured attention, but whatever.
It had to. A USA Today bestseller, Good Morning America.
Yeah,
that's huge.
It's really humbling, honestly, because it was a very hard story for me to write, because so much of it did reflect my own journey. What I hear from a lot of readers is, One, that people who have struggled with depression, struggled with grief, or ever felt like they couldn't find joy. A lot of people see themselves in these pages. And as I articulated, I think some of my journey through Yasmin, that's the heroine, through her journey about me battling out of depression and finding joy again. I think a lot of readers see their own experiences, their own thoughts articulated in some of that. The other thing is there is joy. You know, I think it's a story about healing. I think that it is, I think there's humor in it. You never know what about a story is going to capture people's attention, because you'll think it's going to be this one. You're like, oh my gosh, they're going to eat this one up. And they just like, whatever. And then there'll be a story and you're like, this one's going to be tough. I don't know how they're going to respond. And they kind of eat it
That's
up.
the one that hits.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, or even which part within the story.
Yes.
You don't know
Yes.
what's gonna really capture their attention or
Resonate.
really resonate.
Yeah.
And then when they tell you, then it's not necessarily what you thought. Now, the arcs in the story generally are predictable in terms of keeping the story moving, because you want to keep people turning pages. But just some of the different aspects or characters, you know, some people really are drawn to characters. Some people really don't like characters. That's some of the characters they really dislike. And
I
they'll tell
think
you.
there are a couple of characters in this story who get hate mail. You know, and actually one of them is their teenage daughter. You know, she, not hate, but she has a really difficult time with their divorce. And on top of like and I think the other thing that appeals to a lot of readers is that it talks about how when you lose that and you have children and it's a husband and a wife, that loss is not just, and divorce, it's not just happening to that couple, it's all of that is happening to the whole family. And so their son, who's 10, ends up going into therapy because he's having trouble, and their daughter needs to be in therapy because she's having a lot of trouble resenting her mom and not really understanding her mom's pain. And I think one thing that I really wanted to do with this book is we, especially as Black women, are always supposed to be the superheroes, always supposed to be the ones who put on the cape, always supposed to be the ones who shoulder so much. And yet we are often the most vulnerable, left the most unprotected. And I really wanted to create a safe space. And we're supposed to be the strong Black women who can do it all. And we are strong, you know, some of us are strong, some of us aren't. We should be able to be whatever we are. But I wanted to create a safe space where a woman who seems to have it all together can safely break down. You know, and that's what happens to her, because not only are we strong, but we're also flawed and we're also vulnerable. And
we have feelings.
We're human. We're human.
We have feelings.
Right.
You know, we might seem like we're superhuman sometimes.
We can shoulder a lot.
Yes, but we have feelings.
Shoulder a lot. Sometimes we don't want to be the strong one. Sometimes we want to have the safety to just say, I can't do it, I need some help, without being looked at with a side eye.
Exactly.
Yeah, sometimes you want people to just help without you telling them.
Exactly.
That's harder.
Exactly.
That is hard. It is.
That's harder because, you know, I'll just say men tend to, sometimes, I won't say all men, but they tend to not get hints. You know, you have to be explicit.
Well, I would
know.
venture to say that often it's other Black women who put the pressure on us. Sometimes, you know, we feel like we have to look a certain way, so we're not talked about. I mean, look at Simone Biles. I mean, she killed it at the Olympics, and all some Black women could say about her was that her hair should have been done.
Right.
You know, that's sometimes.
Yeah, those aren't people that she knows though, too. I mean, you know.
No, those weren't people that she knows. Those were people all over social media.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. And sometimes we need to not read that stuff. You know, those people don't know you. So, but I hear what you're saying.
Yeah, I'm just saying that.
Yeah,
Often
and it's hurtful. If she was reading it, I'm sure it was hurtful.
Right.
And
And it's
then you look at
interesting.
women who are upset, or we hurt, and then somebody says, why are you letting that bother you? Or I know you're not crying over that. I know you're not upset at that.
Right.
And so we
Yeah.
always have to hide how we really feel because we have
Right.
to be strong.
And it's interesting that you bring up Simone, because when I was writing this book, Simone, it was around the same time. It's when Simone withdrew from
Yes, the
competition
Olympics. Mhm.
because she cited her own mental health. It was
Right.
also when Naomi had withdrawn from the US Open because of her mental health. It was also when the former Miss America or Miss USA had died by suicide. Like, it was, we as Black women are not often at the center of discussions about mental health. Like, we are not always the ones that people are like, we got to make sure they're okay, and all of a sudden, because of the decisions, because of Simone and because of Naomi and because of other women putting their mental health first, or us seeing that they weren't okay, all of a sudden, when we talked about mental health, we were talking about Black women. And I think that was something that was really resonant for me. And it was one of my big intentions with this book. The other, I think, was specifically for Black men, because the hero is very resistant to therapy in the beginning and then has his own journey. And I think there's a stigma often around mental health just in general, and then even more so with marginalized communities, and then even more so with Black men. And so that was something I really wanted to touch on, was Black men feeling like it, Black men and Black women feeling like they can find safe spaces to not be okay and to get help.
Amen.
So who came up with your title? Was that you or
It was me.
It was
And,
you. So were you thinking about Frankie Beverly?
It's so funny. It's so funny because with that title, titles are really hard for me. Covers are hard for me, which is why it takes me so long with covers, and titles are really hard for me. And I had basically almost finished the book, and my editor was like, what's the title? And I said, I don't know, it'll come to me. And I have a playlist for every book I write. And I, for whatever reason, had put Beyonce's version on there, like from Coachella. And then I was like, oh, I'm gonna put the Frankie Beverly and Mays version too. And I was listening to them back to back, and something just clicked. And I was like, oh, because there's so much that she has to let go of. But there's, before she can go to this next phase of her life. And I just saw how it started clicking. But then it also had those cultural handles. And what I mean by cultural handles is, it's like, if you know, like, there's some readers, maybe especially because a lot of my books have made their way into like mainstream spaces, those more mainstream readers may not see that title immediately, go, oh, Frankie Beverly and Mays. But our community is like, I can't get it out of my head, and I knew
that's the song that's going to resonate with us.
Yes, exactly. But the funny thing is how it has exposed this generational divide, because some of my like 30s and 40s and 50s readers, they're like, oh, Frankie Beverly and Mays. And my Gen Zers are like, oh, Beyonce at Coachella, so it's the generational divide.
Yes.
But that's good. It was recognized by both, by all the different groups.
Yes.
That's good. I think it's very, it's, captivating. It's short, it's memorable. That's what you want in a title. It grabs you, so that's really great. I love the whole aspect of it. And you are right about, we're just now really getting to the point where people are getting somewhat comfortable with seeking counseling, seeking help, but for so many centuries, it was denied to us. And so then it kind of became a taboo.
Yes.
And then now it's more like, accepted than it ever was.
We're getting there. Yeah.
We're getting there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes. So congratulations. Rhonda, you look like you're getting ready to add something.
Well, I was just going to ask, what's next for you? You're riding this wave now. Are you planning for your next move?
Oh yeah. I mean, it's book one in a series called Skyland. And so there's, like I had mentioned, there's like a friend group at the center. It's three friends. And Yasmin, the heroine of this book, Before I Let Go, is the first friend. And then there are two other friends and they get books. Each, it's kind of like the spotlight shifts, to each friend in each book. And so Soledad, who is one of her best friends, I'm writing her book now. So that'll be the next book in the series. And then Hendrix, who is the other friend, her book will come after that, probably not until, for probably another 2 years, because it's like a book a year. So,
Okay.
and then I'm a hybrid author, meaning I publish traditionally, but then I also self-publish. So I have books that I'll be self-publishing in between.
Oh, okay. Well, are you full-time writing now?
Yes, yes.
That
Yeah.
sounds like a full-time writer.
Yeah, if you're
Oh,
doing,
yeah. I've been writing full-time for 7 years, I think.
Oh,
Seven,
good for you.
8 years, 8 years. Yeah,
good for
yeah.
you. So how many total books do you have?
I think it's 22. I think it's 22.
Oh, okay. I didn't know you're I'm always amazed at authors that I really hadn't heard that much about, but then when they come on the show, I know them for their latest book mostly, maybe
Right.
one backlist, and then I find out they have 20 books or 30 books or whatever.
Right.
I'm like, yeah, I'm late to the
That's
party.
the reason why we've always, as authors, we always have to put our best foot forward. There was a lady I'm connected to on Instagram actually posted posted a post. I didn't want to say posted a post, but she posted this graphic that's it was a list of authors and which one was their breakout book. And often it was not their first book. For one, it was their second. For another one, it was their fifth. For another one, I think it was their 10th or their 15th book. So we have to keep putting our best foot forward because we're capturing a new audience with every book, and you never know which one is going to be that breakout book.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely.
And, and then people go back and read your backlist.
Right. And that's what I was going to say is, especially in like the age where we are now with the age of TikTok, because so many of the books that explode on TikTok are 6 years old, 5 years old. Readers find them. And, there's a small group of readers who have read them before, but all of a sudden, this new like wave of readers in a viral environment like TikTok find a book that's 6 years old or 5 years old. My most popular book is 5 years old, still. And a lot, people on TikTok found it and have kind of like continued to reinvent that book and introduce it to new, and Bookstagram too, and continue to like introduce it to new readers. And I also think that's why for me, I'm not someone who really follows trends, and there's nothing wrong with following trends. There's nothing wrong with writing to market. Seeing, oh, okay, people are really liking this, so I'm going to write this, or people are really into this, so I'm going to write this. That's just not what I do. And the thing that I love about that is if I wasn't writing to a trend, but I was writing out of something that was for me a creative conviction, and then I felt it stands the test of time, and when readers circle back 5 years later, my intentions for that book, the integrity of that story, it's still there and it still holds up. It's not about what was trendy at the time or trying to duplicate someone else's success at the time. And I think that my approach to that really helps my backlist kind of stand, when people find those books, they're like, oh, she's got other books. And, so.
Yeah, the thing about trying to copy a trend is you're always behind. You're always behind the 8 ball. You need to be in the front of the trend.
Yes.
Which means you need to be breaking some ground yourself. Whomever. Now you've mentioned something that I've had other people on the show mention, and I want to know how exactly this works or what this really means. And that is, you said you had a playlist for all your books.
Yeah.
So what does that do? What does that mean exactly? What does it mean to you? Because I've heard several people say that they had a playlist Is it for the
Yeah.
readers to listen to?
It's
Is
a
it
combination. For me,
Okay.
music is a really, really huge part of my creative process. Like I mentioned, my title came from my playlist. And for me, before I even start, before I start typing a story, it's vibes, so there's a mood board, a Pinterest board where I start to kind of put together aesthetically what is the
process for you.
Oh, yeah, yeah. So there's like a mood board, like a Pinterest board with how do I think the characters look? What are some of the key places? And I'm really kind of painting this like palette so that for me, it visually grounds the story. And then another part of that, obviously, my background is journalism. And so I do a lot of interviews. I do a lot of research, and that's kind of groundwork. And part of that is like building this world that feels so familiar to me that by the time I'm writing, it's second nature. It's just it's writing in a world that I know. And part of that also is kind of a soundtrack for that story. And I just start pulling songs that it doesn't even have to be lyrically relevant. It can sometimes just be vibes like, oh, this feels like their first kiss, or oh, this feels like that fight they're going to have in chapter 14. And so usually I know this is going to sound crazy, I've had up to 85, 90 songs for a book. And for me, I don't really actively listen to radio, actively listen to anything else while I'm writing. I only listen to that playlist. So I'll encounter songs on television or the radio or something else, but I only actively listen to that playlist. It's kind of immersive. And so that playlist is for me as I'm writing to help create that world. Then when it's time for that book to go public, that playlist, I kind of narrow it down a little bit and not put out all 85 songs, but the songs that, because some of them are just for me as a writer and may not jive as much for the listener, but I will kind of curate that list into a smaller version and share that with readers. And readers love that. But what I'm finding is that readers are now making their own playlists. I get tagged all the time on, hey, I made this, before I let go playlist, if you want to listen to it. And readers are really into that. So there's my playlist, and readers are doing their own as well. But that's how it functions for me. I can't write while I'm listening to music, but it's immersive for me. There are some writers who literally have on music while they're writing, and I
can't because it's too distracting.
Me too.
It depends on what kind of writing I'm doing.
Okay. Yeah.
I can have music on if I'm doing nonfiction. That's my strength. But if I'm doing fiction, I'm trying to create a mood and the characters and get the feel for the dialogue. I can't. It's too distracting. Now, Rhonda, do you have playlists for your books?
I don't have a playlist for my books. However, I love the idea of a playlist for my books. For me, I don't have to be in complete quiet, but I do get lost in the world. So what I mean by that is when I'm writing something and I really want to set that scene, I'll get lost in doing research for an hour just so I can get what I need to build that scene. And sometimes I might watch a movie or a TV show that has to do with my scene, just so I can just get a little lost in that scene. So I think my process is probably a little bit different, but everything is related.
Right.
Okay. So when is now this book came out when? Did this come
November
out?
15th. It came
November,
out.
so it's new. I thought it was November. And yeah, you got a lot of reviews fast. I mean, that's great. I think it's wonderful.
She was on Good Morning America
and then Times Square and all that. But that's really wonderful. I love to see that kind of momentum.
Thank you.
So the second book in the series is going to be out roughly a year from now.
Roughly. I mean, traditional publishing is slow.
Yeah.
And so, this second book, I think I'm supposed to turn it in like at the beginning of March, and it won't come out until March of 2024.
Right.
And then the second book will come out early 2025.
Okay.
A book that I'm self-publishing will be out this summer. So when you're self-publishing, it can be fast. You
Yeah,
write it, you find the
yes,
cover, you
yes.
edit, you can put it out, so
Yes.
I'll have one out of mine probably like in August. But this one, which is traditionally published, won't be out until 2024.
Well,
You're going to be a busy lady until 2024. It's not like you're going to be sitting around on your hands.
Oh no, no.
wonderful.
And I actually have an Audible original book. I did an audiobook that I wrote, a book I wrote for Audible that's coming out February 9th.
Did you read it?
And lots of other stuff in between. It's a very busy next 3 to 4 years. Like everything that I'm going to write for the next 3 years is already set.
Okay.
That's awesome. Now, did you read your audiobook yourself?
No, I don't narrate, but I'm very fastidious about narrators and audiobooks. That's the main way I read personally, is through audiobooks. So I'm very, very involved in that process. One of my books, Real, made audio history last year by becoming the first Black romance, first book written by a Black author, first book narrated by Black narrators to win an Audi. And the Audi is like the highest recognition in audiobooks. And this just shows about systemic racism, that no Black author, no Black romance had won it until last year, 2022. But my book Real did. And I think part of that is because I'm obsessive about audio. Like we just poured everything into that audiobook, and I'm really, really proud of it. Probably because I'm an audiophile. Like I don't read paperback or ebook very much anymore. It's mostly in my ears now. So that's really special to me.
Well, Kennedy, we're at the end of our show, and it's 9 o'clock. So this means this is the end. It's time for our outro, and we really appreciate you. And congratulations on your success. I have to check out your work.
Thank you. Thank you guys for having me.
Thank you for being here. This was a great way to end the show. I love how bubbly you are at 10 o'clock at night.
Okay. Don't be fooled. It's all lip gloss and mascara.
All right. Thank you so much for being a guest on the show.
Have a good night.
You
Bye.
too. So that's it for this week. We have had a great show, and we're excited about what the year has in store. So our next week's show is going to be great, and we have a lot of great guests coming up in the weeks ahead. So that's it for me, and we're ending the show. I'm Gwen Richardson signing off.
All right, have a great night. And I'm Dr. Rhonda Lawson.
We'll see you next week.
Thank you for tuning in, and join us next Tuesday at 7 p.m. Central, 8 p.m. Eastern for another edition of Black Authors Matter TV.